Dan was a local reporter who covered the story right from the very beginning and has been used by all the main news outlets because he's a trusted source. Although that wasn't how the public and the community saw him right at the very beginning. Dan, thank you for joining me. Let's go back to that Facebook post in May 2020 and tell me what your initial reaction was.
I mean, yeah, it was an extremely long and detailed Facebook post. There were these horrendous images that she'd shared of, she had a black eye that she could barely open. There were these horrible bruises all over her body. You can see it there. It was an extremely shocking post, and I think just like everyone else, it was just horrendous to see, and people were wondering, just what has gone on here, and how has it happened without anyone seemingly knowing about it.
And what was your reaction to that as a paper, Dan? What did you start to do?
Well, obviously, something like that is extremely rare for it to happen, I suppose, anywhere, especially in Barrow. So, we saw it and we set about reporting on it. I think it was sort of shortly after 2 p.m. that day when she'd posted it. And then so the next few hours we were sort of, putting this to police, saying, what can you say about this? And I think, later that day they sort of came out with, we're aware of this post. We've been investigating already.
And where does it go from there? Because it was in a matter of days, they then tell you that there has been someone charged. But at that point, you didn't know who that was, did you?
Yeah, I mean, not slightly controversially, very controversially. I think it was the 2 days after the original post, we had a video statement released by, one of the most senior officers at Cumbria Police saying, sort of addressing the claims in this post. And he sort of said, there's a grooming gang being alleged here, but we want to tell people that is not the case at all. And then he revealed at the end of that statement that someone had in fact been charged in relation to the post. And obviously, in the coming days, it would become obvious that it wasn't, anyone that was involved in a grooming gang. It was Williams herself.
So you have an initial story that she posts online that attracts quite a lot of attention. The police within days notify you that someone has been charged. You didn't know who that was. They then come out in days later and say that there is no grooming gang. But that wasn't the end of it, was it? That the impact on the communities, they ran with that initial story. And what started to happen to your community, to you and to your fellow reporters?
Yeah, I mean, just as you heard from the judge then, it was an extremely turbulent time in Barrow, very tense. So, people were starting to think that there was some kind of cover-up, the fact that it had not been reported or supposedly investigated by the police. So, people were sort of looking towards the paper and thinking, why have you reported on her being charged? Why have you not, why are we not aware of this already? So people sort of thought that we were involved in some kind of conspiracy. So what happened then?
You were working with the police, basically. You were covering up this story with the police.
Exactly. Yeah, people thought there was some sort of grand cover-up to silence Williams, and obviously out of that came this sort of torrent of abuse towards us. Our Facebook inbox was sort of flooded with messages like people saying, "Why are you protecting paedophiles?" basically.
And was that quite a sense of overwhelming? Have you been in a scenario where you'd had such a backlash from people on a story you'd done before?
No, I mean, obviously, you work for a newspaper. You're used to, the
not everyone likes what you write, do they?
Yeah, the rough and tumble of, when you report something that's maybe slightly controversial, but yeah, nothing at all like this ever.
And where did the threats directly come? I mean, did you get direct threats from people? Did the paper get direct threats?
Yeah, there were all sorts of things sent to us, mainly on social media with, just abuse. But then, there were sort of threats of, maybe not necessarily overt threats of violence, but, trying to sort of suggest things, trying to sort of suggest that we needed to keep an eye out.
And did you or did your other colleagues fear any violence or, any issues in relation to the people that were getting very angry?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, there were definitely specific threats towards my colleague Amy at the time. And, police did advise her to leave her home. So she did have to leave the area at the time.
Astonishing, really. And this was because you were covering this story. But the story started to take on its own legs, didn't it? Because other people started to be arrested as well. So how did that come about? How did people end up getting arrested when they were in a position that they had charged her? So just give me a timeline of what was happening.
Yeah, I mean, so after she'd been charged, I mean, there was already anger and outrage about this post from when people saw it, but after she'd been charged, that was when it sort of really ratcheted up more. And out of that came people smashing windows and things like that. And I think we've heard from the police now there was this huge threefold increase in hate crime. There was something like 151 extra crimes recorded that year as as a result of that post, basically. So there was all sorts of things happening, and obviously we had Tommy Robinson come up to do his own investigations, is what he said, and he ended up himself getting arrested for an alleged assault that was later dropped by the police.
Let's have a look at them. I don't think they've got any sound, are they? But we've got some shots of Tony Robinson in the area. This is him. Just talk through what Tony Robinson was up. Why was he up there? Why did he go there?
Yeah, I mean, he there were these claims going around of some large scale grooming gang, and he said that he'd come up to investigate. Obviously during the pandemic, you weren't really allowed to travel, but he came to Barrow and he was filmed having a bit of a scuffle with police outside the town, and he was sort of claiming he was a journalist who was allowed to come in. So he came in, and you can see it there. He came in and he was attending these protests that were held. It was just sort of talking to people, doing a bit of filming.
So his position was he was supporting Williams in the fact that she was making a report that there were Asian gangs involved in the grooming of children, which of course we do know do take place. He was basically coming up there to add his voice against them. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe you can imagine that he has his agenda, and people say that he's got his own agenda. But all we really knew publicly from him was that he'd come up to investigate. But from all sides, really, from even Ellie Williams' family, no one really wanted him to be there, because it increased the tension in the town. Really, it really wasn't welcome.
So let's go back to the beginning. So we have this post by Williams in May 2020. And then how soon after that were people starting to be arrested? Because there wasn't just Mohammed, there were other people that's impacted on.
Yeah, I mean, so she said she'd put this post out, and on the 20th of May 2020. But what people didn't know is that for about a year, police had already been investigating her. She'd already been charged with multiple counts of perverting the course of justice. So I think there were about there were 5 named men eventually on the indictment against her, who were basically taken into police custody as a result of claims made against them. Claims which we now know were a complete fabrication, basically. So all these people were drawn into this story that she'd put forward.